Across the vast, sunburned plains of La Mancha, under a heat so fierce it melted the horizon, lived a thin man with a weathered face and eyes burning with light and madness. His name was Alonso Quijano, a simple country nobleman who spent his days lost in books of chivalry, knights, dragons, forgotten glories, and noble quests that had long faded from the world. But the more he read, the less the real world made sense. The cracked walls of his old home no longer seemed like walls. They were the borders between reality and the impossible. One silent night, as the moon rested over the plains, something inside him broke, or perhaps finally awoke. He lifted his eyes to the sky and whispered into the dark, "The world needs a knight, and that knight shall be me." And so Don Quixote of La Mancha was born. He gathered scraps of rusted armor, a dented helmet, and mounted his frail horse, Rocinante, a creature as worn and weary as his master's sanity. But in his mind, Rocinante was a legendary steed, and he the chosen hero who would restore honor to a world that had forgotten it. Before setting out, he also chose the name of his imagined beloved, Dulcinea del Toboso, a simple peasant woman transformed in his imagination into the most perfect of ladies. For her, he would fight giants, or windmills. When the sun rose, the old knight rode out across the fields, spear in hand, proclaiming justice where only silence lived. Villagers watched him pass, laughing behind their hands. But Don Quixote saw no mockery, only destiny. At every step he imagined hearing celestial trumpets. Every shadow became an enemy, every hill a new quest waiting to unfold. Then came the first battle. On the open road he saw a line of windmills. To his eyes, colossal giants waving monstrous arms. He shouted a battle cry and charged. The wind roared, the blades turned. Reality struck him down with brutal force. But when the dust settled, he smiled through broken teeth and whispered, "Better to fall fighting than to live asleep." And that was how the legend began. A man against the world. A dreamer defying reason. A knight who sought no glory, only faith in the impossible. Through fields and storms, laughing at pain, Don Quixote rode on, not just through Spain, but into eternity, and he had no idea his true journey was only beginning. The sun scorched the plains of La Mancha, testing the endurance of those who still dared to dream. Don Quixote, covered in dust and pride, wandered through the endless horizon, chasing glory. His heart burned with conviction, yet his mind was a battlefield between the real and the imagined. After his fall before the giants of the wind, he never doubted himself. Instead, he believed he had been betrayed by sorcerers. For to a true knight, the impossible isn't madness, it's destiny. In his next journey, Quixote arrived at an old inn which, through his eyes, transformed into an enchanted castle. The innkeeper, a sharp and mocking man, saw in the rusted knight a chance for amusement. Pretending to be a noble lord, he performed a playful ceremony and knighted the delusional traveler. Under the pale moonlight, Don Quixote knelt and swore his oath. "I vow to defend the weak, to honor my lady Dulcinea, and never retreat before injustice." From that moment, the man he once was disappeared. What remained was the moonlit night, the last dreamer in a world that had forgotten how to dream. But every knight needs a squire. In the dusty streets of his village, fate introduced him to Sancho Panza, a humble farmer, quick-witted and firmly grounded in the soil of reality. Sancho didn't believe in dragons, but he did believe in bread and wine, and Quixote promised plenty of both, speaking of kingdoms and rewards. So the small man climbed onto his donkey and followed the mad knight, not just carrying his master's belongings, but unknowingly his hope. Somewhere deep inside, Sancho wanted to believe that maybe, within madness, there could be truth. Together, knight and squire rode into the unknown, one with his eyes fixed on the sky, the other on the road ahead. Between laughter and confusion, an unlikely friendship began to form. On their path they faced peasants, merchants, and soldiers, all mistaken by Quixote for monsters, sorcerers, and enemies of his lady. Every defeat only deepened his faith, every humiliation a new test of his mission. At times, Sancho would try to bring him back to reason. "Master, they're just men," he'd say. But Quixote would smile and answer, "Sancho, the world is only as big as the courage of those who see it." And little by little, Sancho began to believe too. As the sun set over the dusty road, two silhouettes stretched across the horizon, one tall and upright, the other small and bent. Yet together they carried the same ideal, to resist the world's cynicism with the strength of dreams. The knight and his squire rode on without a clear destination, guided only by one truth, that there was something sacred in simply continuing, even when no one else believed. And so, through laughter, falls, and promises, one of history's most legendary duos was born. Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, madness and reason, side by side, riding toward infinity. One morning, beneath a pale dawn spreading across the fields of La Mancha, Don Quixote mounted his horse once again, his armor clinking like fragile echoes of forgotten battles. But this time he would not ride alone. From a nearby village came Sancho Panza, short, round, and practical, a man of soil and belly, not of dreams. Yet something in Don Quixote's burning eyes drew him in. Maybe it was madness, or maybe it was the promise of adventure that every man secretly longs for. Sancho listened, wide-eyed, as Don Quixote spoke of kingdoms waiting to be restored, of giants to be defeated, of honor lost and to be reclaimed. And before reason could stop him, Sancho accepted. In exchange, his master promised him an island, a distant, imaginary island where Sancho would one day be governor. And so they set off, a knight and his squire, one chasing glory, the other chasing bread. Two souls bound by a strange dream, the impossible desire to make meaning out of the ordinary. Along dusty paths and under blazing suns, they talked, argued, and laughed. Sancho's common sense clashed against Quixote's fevered imagination. Yet between them something deeper was born, a friendship so absurd and so pure that it seemed to belong to another world. Because in the end, Don Quixote needed Sancho's feet on the ground just as much as Sancho needed Don Quixote's eyes fixed on the stars. The journey of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza became a spectacle along the roads of Spain. Wherever they went, they left laughter, confusion, and a strange glimmer of admiration. Even in madness there was something the world had forgotten: courage. In taverns and marketplaces, people whispered about the old knight who fought invisible enemies and spoke to the wind as if it were an ancient deity. Some called him mad, others a poet. But no one could ignore him. One afternoon, Quixote spotted a caravan of monks approaching. To his eyes, the black robes were the garb of sinister sorcerers. Raising his spear, he shouted, "In the name of justice and light, I will free the souls you hold captive." He charged. Chaos erupted. The monks scattered in terror. Sancho, embarrassed, tried to apologize, but Quixote was lost in ecstasy, convinced he had defeated servants of darkness. Soon after, they came across a traveling theater troupe, men dressed as kings and monsters preparing a play. In Quixote's mind, they were prophets of a distant kingdom. He knelt before them, saying, "I salute you, messengers of destiny." The actors laughed. Sancho chuckled as well. But for a fleeting moment, Quixote's sincerity turned laughter into silence. For an instant, everyone remembered something long forgotten, the thrill of believing in the impossible. Through days and nights, Quixote began to see something profound. The world did not hate him. It had merely forgotten how to dream. People mocked him, yet his words sometimes reached weary hearts. One starry night, sitting by a flickering campfire, he said to Sancho, "You know, my friend, madness is simply the courage to keep believing when everyone else has given up." Sancho was silent. For a moment the simple farmer looked at the sky and saw, or chose to see, the same impossible vision as his master. But fate is unforgiving to those who challenge logic. Somewhere along the road awaited a mirror, a reflection of reality, that would confront Don Quixote with his greatest battle, not against monsters, but against truth itself. The journey was no longer an escape from reality. It was a confrontation with it. And as the campfire's embers danced in the wind, the night whispered, "Dreams are the sword with which a man fights against forgetting." Sancho looked at him and quietly replied, "Then we shall fight together, master." The night wind carried their pact, gentle as a blessing from the universe, before the storm that was yet to come. After months of adventures, falls, and fleeting triumphs, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza rode along roads that seemed to blur the line between reality and imagination. Their fame preceded them. Villagers, travelers, and even nobles whispered about the man who faced invisible giants and proclaimed justice to a sleeping world. Along the way, they arrived at the court of a duke and duchess who had read Quixote's story. Curious, they decided to play cruel pranks, turning every act of bravery into mockery. Yet the knight, faithful to his honor, perceived nothing of the jest. Each festivity became a trial, each challenge an opportunity to demonstrate courage and loyalty to his imagined lady. Meanwhile, Sancho Panza underwent a quiet transformation. The farmer who had once followed blindly for promise of reward began to understand the complexities of his master and the fragile nature of human justice. Governing the imaginary insula Barataria temporarily, he glimpsed the delicate line between idealism and reality, and the inevitable disillusionment that power brings. Don Quixote, on the other hand, continued to believe in the world's hidden magic. He fought shadows, imagined monsters, and invented enemies with unyielding intensity. Every physical defeat became a moral victory, every humiliation a lesson in courage. His view of the world was a broken mirror, reflecting both the madness and the purity that resided in his heart. The contrast between master and squire deepened. Quixote embodied unbreakable ideals, courage defying reason. Sancho represented pragmatism, seeing the world clearly, yet still capable of glimpsing the impossible. Together they traversed not just the landscapes of Spain, but the intricate geography of the human soul. Even when deceived by nobles or mocked by villagers, Don Quixote maintained his integrity. Each adventure, each imaginary battle, each promise to Dulcinea reinforced his commitment to virtue, even if virtue existed only in his mind. And yet, amidst this journey of illusions and lessons, Quixote began noticing subtle signs of frailty in both body and spirit. Wounds piled up. Fatigue whispered that madness and glory are not eternal. One silent night, they sat by a deserted road. The wind carried secrets only dreamers can hear. Quixote, gazing at the stars, said, "Sancho, perhaps the world is crueler than we imagine, but still, it is our duty to try to change it." Sancho, in a gesture of silent loyalty, simply nodded. Returning to the village was no longer merely a physical journey. It was the beginning of awakening, the inevitable confrontation between dream and reality, honor and weariness, the ideal that drives and the world that resists. The wind whispered promises and memories of future battles, and for the first time a faint premonition of the last adventure approached. The sun rose over La Mancha, but something in Don Quixote no longer shone as it once had. The knight who had charged Windmills as giants and defended imagined innocence now felt the weight of age, defeat, and a world that would never understand his dreams. Rocinante, his faithful steed, moved with slower steps, reflecting the silent fatigue of his master. They arrived in Barcelona, where destiny awaited. Sanson Carrasco, a friend who had once tried to bring Quixote back to reason, reappeared disguised as the Knight of the White Moon. This final challenge was not just physical, it tested the boundaries between dream and reality, ideal and mortality. The combat was intense. Each clash of spears echoed all previous battles, the windmills, the monks, the barrels of wine. Yet this time, Don Quixote felt the truth weigh upon him. His arms no longer had the strength of youth, and each charge reminded him that even the noblest dreams meet resistance in the real world. Defeated, he fell to his knees before Sanson, but not with shame. His eyes, still alive with courage, dignity, and serenity, reflected the mastery of the impossible. The man who had chased the unattainable finally understood that his time riding the roads of madness had ended. Sancho, loyal to the very last adventure, stayed at his side. The farmer, who had learned so much from his master's madness, felt a profound sorrow, not only for the loss of a friend, but for the end of an ideal that had turned every road, every battle, every moment of danger into a lesson in humanity. Back in the village, Don Quixote fell ill. In his final lucidity, he renounced the books that had driven him to madness and reclaimed his true name, Alonso Quijano, the Good. With a sigh, mixing relief and exhaustion, he looked at Sancho and said, "My friend, I fought for a world that did not exist, but at least I tried." Sancho held his hand, understanding that the greatest lesson was not in victories, but in the courage to believe, even when all seemed impossible. On his deathbed, Alonso closed his eyes forever, surrounded by the few who understood his soul, those who valued courage above reason. And so ended the dream of the knight, but not his legend. For even in death, Don Quixote left a lesson. The world may never understand our dreams, but the strength to pursue them is what makes life extraordinary. And Sancho, now wiser, knew that carrying the memory of this man would be his own triumph. And now I want to hear from you. What is your windmill? That impossible battle you still carry in your heart? Comment below. Let's talk about the dream still worth fighting for. Now, if this video touched something in you, don't let it die in silence. Like and share it with someone who, like you, also needs to remember their true nature. And if you want to continue this journey with us, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell. Each video here is an invitation to see yourself and life from a new perspective. If you're looking for more guidance on your path of self-discovery, I've selected a video appearing on the screen that can help you take the next step. Choose one and meet me there. See you in the next video. Bye.